As part of Anticipation Week, we have one of Wisconsin's best poets on the podcast today. His name is James Hamilton, and he tours all around not only Wisconsin, but the Midwest, sharing his wonderful poems with audiences in both small towns and large cities. Please welcome James Hamilton to PodPaca. How are you today?
Great, thanks for having me.
So you have published 5 collections of poems. When did you start doing poetry, and was this always your passion?
So writing has been my passion for my life. Since I was a boy, my grandmother is a published author. She wrote a Harlequin romance of all things back in the 80s. So I always wanted to be a writer. And I think my life choices and just, the way society's geared today, work, work, work. But right about a year before we had the COVID-19 lockdown, I started writing poetry, and I don't even know where it came from, to be honest with you. It just people ask me about my process all the time. I say the universe sends stuff down and I write it down. So I started doing that, and then the week before the COVID lockdown, I was doing construction work in like mold, water, and fire stuff, and the company shut down for COVID, and I got unemployment, and I thought, you know what? If there's ever a time that I'm going to try to do this, now's the time. I'm cooped up inside the house. I got money coming in. I might as well give it a shot. So I did. And I put one submission out for that first book for American Junkie, and they took it, which I'm told now is unheard of. But there you have it.
Did you always want to be a poet, even when you were a construction worker before COVID?
No, the crazy thing about it is, I wanted to write. I wanted to write crime fiction. The poetry just happened. I didn't even consider myself a poet after I published the first book. I thought, well, this is great. Let's see what happens. And and that led to a second book and to a third even before I started calling myself a poet. And the performance aspect of it didn't happen until I just had my year anniversary of performing out live on July 18th. So it's like a year and 2 weeks is all I've been out doing it. So this kind of rise to being a performance artist and a beat poet and all of that stuff happened extremely quickly.
So are you able to do poetry full time, or is this more of a part-time job or hobby for you?
So I could say I have done it full time for the last year and a half or so. I don't have a day job. My day job is being a poet, spreading the word, and writing, performing. That said, I get an awful lot of support from my community here, people in the community, and people that believe in what I'm doing.
So, speaking of the community, let's talk about how you will be a part of the Anticipation Week for Arts on the Square. On the Friday before, you will be at the Revival boutique, and you will be doing some poetry while people shop. Can you tell me a little more about what that's going to be like?
Sure. So people can come into the store from 3 to 6 at the Revival. It's right on Fulton Street. So when they're on their way down to the street dance, ladies can pop into the boutique and get the shop for the latest fit. While they're there, we can have like a 2-minute conversation. Tell me some stuff about yourself, and I'll compose original poetry, personal poetry for shoppers while they shop. There's no charge for it. It's pay what you want. So essentially tips for that. Nobody's obligated to pay anything. And it's kind of just my way of giving back to the community that gives to me, I guess. I've done a couple of them in boutiques around. I did one for the Revival in Neenah. I've been in this store last month, and I'm doing one in Ripon for another boutique coming up here. But the thing that I didn't expect to get out of that was, you know, the satisfaction on people's faces, the hugs, the just pure joy when you write something for them, and people come into a store, they shop 10 or 15 minutes, and in that 10 or 15 minutes, they walk away with a completely 100% personalized piece of poetry just for them. I don't keep a copy. It's theirs. They can do it. They can crumple it up and throw it in the trash if they want to when they leave. But the feedback that I've gotten from it, from doing it a couple of times now, has been pretty humbling.
So, do you like doing this kind of poetry where you are doing it on the fly, or do you like the more long-term writing process with your poetry? What's your favorite?
There's a high stress level involved with writing poetry for people on the spot because it's an instant feedback type of thing. And if it sucks, you can tell on their face that, that they don't like it. So I guess I like that, interacting with the public on a one-on-one type of basis. There's nothing like that. That said, writing can be very neurotic. I'm alone a lot. I'm in the car a lot, and the actual process of composing can be daunting. Performing can be just like super energizing. I was up in Rhinelander last Saturday for their Push Against Loneliness festival, and I performed a piece for like 300 people up there, and had them interactive, screaming back and forth to me. And I mean, I felt like Mick Jagger up there. It was wonderful. It was great.
You mentioned that you had only been performing poetry for about a year and a couple months. Was part of that because of COVID, or did it take some time for you to want to perform on stage?
So my initial, so I can go back to April of last year. WAPACA's got a great arts community and a poetry board that does 2 readings a year. And I went to the reading that they had at Danes Hall in April of 2023. And I met this guy, DG Clearing. He heard me read one piece, and then notice I say read and not perform. I read one piece, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, I think you should come down with me to Milwaukee. There's a longest running poets open mic in the state is at Linneman's River West down on Locust in Milwaukee. I said, okay, sure, why not? So we hooked up, and I'm driving down with him, and he says, what do you want to do with your art? And I said, I kind of just want to stay home and write books and have people buy them, and he says, yeah, that's probably not going to work. He says, nobody knows who you are. And I said, yeah. He said, in order to get people to know who you are, you have to get out and perform. And I said, you mean read? And he goes, no, I mean perform. And I'm not really an extrovert. And at the time, I didn't really want to be up in front of people at all. And he's a very dynamic performer and very polished. And he kind of brought me along for those first, April, May, June, and into July before I actually went out and started doing it with the old college effort. Um, we'd go to readings and he'd record me, and then he'd send me a recording the next day, and he'd say, you need to listen to yourself so you get better. I'd be like, I don't like the sound of my own voice. I don't want to listen to myself. So I'd leave it sit, and he'd message again the next day and say, did you listen to it yet? No. But I started to, and he was right. I started getting better and better. And now that is pretty much where most of my efforts go, is into the traveling and performing aspect of what I do.
What is the main difference between just reading a poem you made and performing your poem? What does it take to be a good performance poet?
Well, it becomes a performance. There is I know a lot of the working poets in the area now, and we have a lot of discussion about that. It is what we call page poets that generally write their poetry to be on a piece of paper or be read. And then there's what we call stage poets, so page versus stage. The difference for me is in the inflection of voice. We can go from, quiet, it adds another dimension. When you give somebody, like I can hand you a book and say, read one of my poems, you're going to read it. When I read it, I'm going to put accents on certain words. My voice is going to go up and down. It adds a whole nother dimension to the feeling of the piece. And you can control that. When you give somebody a piece of paper, you're kind of at their mercy, you know, and how they interpret it. Which I think both have merits. If a piece is strong enough, it should hold up for both. Is anybody going to read it the same way that I read it? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that they won't get the same inference out of it or the same weight out of it that somebody that listened to me read it would get.
Is there such thing as performing or reading your poem in the correct way? Do you ever try performing a poem and you think, oh, this is completely not what I wanted to do with this poem?
So some of my earlier stuff, I think that when I read it now, I go, I would have done it differently today. But I think that's growth as an artist. A lot of what I write today, I write with a mind to, being equally strong on the page and the stage. The way that I read it, perform it, is the way that I wrote it today. So I write a lot of them to be orated by me. That doesn't mean that somebody that picks it up and reads it. I've had people take my book and read my pieces at poetry readings, their own way. And that's fine. I'm not really averse to it or anything. It just, for me, I think whatever they get out of it, great. However they interpret it, great. There is no wrong way to do it. There's my way, there's your way, there's everybody's way. I think that's what makes art special, is that nobody can do you like you can do you. So the original product is the way that I perform it, the way that I wrote it to be performed by me. But like anybody that writes a great song, 10 years later, somebody covers it and they go, wow, that's a great interpretation of that. The original artist isn't saying, man, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
It's a progression, a moment frozen in time. And, there is no wrong interpretation.
Let's transition and talk a little bit more about the poetry scene in Wisconsin. Um, has it grown since COVID, and how strong is poetry becoming in Wisconsin?
I could tell you it's been on a steady growth. Even I see it in the last year. Now, COVID shut down everything, musicians, poetry, everything as far as a performance aspect went. But what rose up in the wake of COVID was the podcast and things like that that would come on and simulate open mics. I do a show out of a New Yorican Poets Cafe in New York City. Is probably the most famous poets cafe in the world, and they do a Thursday night show with 20 of us. I'm on there a lot. I'm pretty much, if I'm not booked on a Thursday night, I'm on that show. And that helps. But the growth that I've seen in our neck of the woods, and pretty much statewide, has been phenomenal. The number of open mics is probably sixfold to what it was last year. And I probably get 2 emails a week from people that want to start them, that are looking for hosts and things like that.
Is it more popular in the larger cities, or is there a pretty active scene in smaller communities as well?
So Green Bay has got a great scene. I host one Thursday a month there at the Urban Culture and Arts Center. But there is a ton of poetry events happening in Green Bay all the time. Milwaukee's got a bunch. It's big in Racine. Madison and the college town has always had a great scene in that surrounding area, Spring Green and that. Stevens Point actually has a gal, Frisia, she's a poetry professor, so that you can actually go there and get a degree. They have an open mic that I attend regularly, and we've got an open mic right here in Wapaka, first Wednesdays at the Grand National Lounge. So it's definitely growing, and there's more and more people coming out and doing it. The content of those open mics is changing, I believe. Last year, even I was seeing there were a lot of those page poets coming out, and a lot of those people have kind of converted their work now where they're putting more, vocal emphasis and accents and turning them more into performance pieces. I think it's a good change, and I think it will help growth, because the other thing that I noticed is, like, last year, most of the people who were going to the open mics were poets. And now I'm seeing people that don't write, just general people coming in to see poetry and experience it that aren't artists. And that's huge. If you have an audience out there that's willing to come in and pay $5 or something like that to see you perform, that shows real growth in the scene.
We're lucky enough that James is going to perform one of his poems for us. Before you perform your poem, is there anything you want to tell the audience about this poem that you're performing?
Yeah, so I consider myself a beat poet, like the 50s and 60s beat poets, a modern version of like a Jack Kerouac type of thing. And the piece that I'm going to perform, I actually call Beat, and it is I threw a whole bunch of beatnik slang into this piece, as kind of an homage to that generation, and then kind of put a modern spin on it, and then my own little twist to it. But that's about the setup that it needs. It's the old school poets that hitchhiked from town to town and wrote poetry for people or performed it on street corners for tips, and they lived that way. And yeah, I think that's about it.
All right, here's James Hamilton with performing his poem.
Sun spit, radiation bits, rain, solar carnage, parallel promenade rays of bright prison scale bars play monochromatic, magnetronic, orchestral symposium concerto compositions in the key of standard cosmic deviation. Dark to light, days roll to night, back to day. Crazy beat. I sleep when I sleep, hopping train to train rides, Dharma bummed, backpack body armor, skipping technocratic digitalis riddled scrolls, whopping mind numbing thumbing out for rail noise, coal traffic, tar, diesel stench, smoke, crash. Brash, fast landscape band, panoramic horizon flecks of trees, butterflies, and inert gas. Eaten out of stabbed bean cans. I can glide, boss through present time, temporal diaspora, outside line, battle society, clad in mock fodder, rat fold secondhand finds, rounded peg, square hole variety, beat down. Graffiti is my wall art. I am just bad news. A cheap, creeped gin mill cowboy, juice head, lean, dope fiend, junkie, unwashed public bathroom, food pantry, tenement, shelter, scamp, tramp, vamp, junk man, mingus, monk, bird, jazz club, cockroach, parasite, market raid, pirate take, chicken chase in shapes and drapes, beaten gravel, hopping a bit until an angel comes along to pull me out of this for a minute. Man, I am unraveled, disheveled, bugging out, solo flight, fight, banana peeled, slip and slither, swinging, jungle fed, semi hairless ape on a vine, noodling life and beat. Thank you.
That was awesome. And
Thank
can you tell me again what the title of that poem was?
It's called Beat.
Beat. That was
Yep.
wonderful. And is Beat a newer poem that you wrote, or
So yeah, I'm doing the play in Wyawega coming up just before Anticipation Week at the Girard Opera House. The premise of the play is it's a talent show in 1959, which is right in the middle of the Beat poet generation. So I'm playing a 1959 Beat poet, and I woke up one morning and I said, I got to write a piece about this. So I literally wrote this like 5 days ago,
oh wow.
and I'm going to perform it live for the first time at that play.
So about how long did it take you to create this poem?
4 hours.
Wow.
4 hours in a car. So somebody told me once, if you go to sleep listening to something, you can learn things, and you can, it's that whole creative aspect. So for about 3 nights, when I went to sleep, I'd put YouTube on and I'd run old Jack Kerouac interviews and things like that. And I woke up one morning at about 4:30, and I had this in my head. I had that sunspit radiation bits line in my head, and I could not. I got in a car. I drove down to Rotary Park, and I sat there for. That's why I know it was 4 hours. I sat there from 6 till like 10:05, and it was done. And I haven't changed it since.
Wow. Is that normal and for your writing process for it to take that long?
Yeah.
Because it seems like I don't know if that's a short amount of time or a long amount of time for a
I
normal
mean,
poetry creative process, but
people will tell me that, sometimes it happens faster. Um, there's two parts to it. There is, getting down the thoughts and putting down those pertinent lines that are getting your vision across. And then there's a crafting portion where I'm actually going through and I'm reading it. I'm recording it onto my phone and playing it back over the car radio so I can hear the way I'm doing it, and making adjustments on the fly when I do that. The crafting process takes, out of that 4 hours, that was probably 3 of the hours. I literally had the bulk of the text down in less than an hour.
well, it was wonderful. It was really great. And
Thank you.
is there anything else that you would like to talk about with whether it be with your poetry or just something you would like the general public to know?
Well, I think that, the general public's going to get exposed to it during Anticipation Week, but WAPACA is does an extremely good job of supporting and promoting and giving artists like me an avenue to share, the work that we're passionate about. And I don't know if that gets said enough. The people that are doing that at the Community Arts Board, Marcy in particular, the radio station, Wayne at the radio station, and Good Morning Wapaka has been nothing short of amazing for me, and getting me out there and promoting and supporting what I do. And they're in for a great week of artists of all kinds: music, poetry, the visual arts, all of that stuff. And Wapaka is as good as anywhere that I've been in the state, and I've been everywhere. you know, and they're as good or better than anybody in the state at supporting artists. This is a great place to live and a great place to create.
I know Wapaka residents appreciate that. Before we go, I do want to make sure that people know where to find where to not only see you perform, but to also get your books. So, where can people shop for your poetry books?
So you can get all of the books on Amazon. You can search by title or just search by James Hamilton by author, and you'll find them out there. Or you can get them on my fan site, which is co-fi.com/James Hamilton Poet. And the best way to connect with all of that is on my Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/James Hamilton Author.
Yeah, and you do put on your Facebook page where and when you will be performing, not only in
Yep.
Wisconsin, but in nearby states as well.
Mhm.
Do you mostly stick to the Midwest, correct?
Currently, yeah, yep.
Okay, so if you're anywhere in the Midwest, I bet James will be swinging by there at some point. So make sure to see when he will be performing. Thank you, James, for being on PodPaca today as part of the Articipation Week. And it was great to have you on. You're the first poet we have ever had on the podcast. So it was very cool to learn more about the world of poetry.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me.